The Australian Navy Fleet Air Arm at that stage was probably at its most active in the preparation for the extra carriers, which never eventuated. The Australian Navy bought Skyhawk fighter jets and tracker anti-submarine fixed-wing aircraft, did a fairly extensive modification on the rather big Wessex helicopters, fitted with a sonar for detecting submarines underwater. And that was the principal role of the Fleet Air Arm, was anti-submarine detection, fighter protection of the rest of the Navy units, and operating from the aircraft carrier Melbourne. That was our basic role. And so for the 8 of us that went to 9 Squadron to be operating in direct support of the Australian Army was something a bit different, very different to the normal Navy routines. And of course that was the same thing for the Navy who went to the 135th integration with the American Army. It was something quite different to our normal operations from Navy aircraft carrier. It's debatable whether we got more flying. The Navy was operating, around the clock operations, training for the being on board the carrier and flying off the carrier, and so Navy pilots were flying a fair bit. Perhaps we flew a little bit more in Vietnam, but not that much more. The big difference was that, and I think it's a great advantage for me, was that I was within the RAAF structure with others that I'd trained with, and later on I went back to the Air Force as a flying instructor. So having spent a few years off the aircraft carrier and doing an instructor's course, I went back to 5 Squadron in Canberra as a flying instructor, teaching Air Force and Navy pilots how to fly helicopters. So it was lovely to have this operational experience with the Air Force, and of course to develop rapport with the Australian Army, particularly the SAS unit. 9 Squadron worked extensively with the SAS. That was something that the Australians were extremely good at, led the whole field in this clandestine operations that the SAS did, inserting their patrols and bringing them out in a way that no one really knew what was happening from the ground, was excellent. And so the rapport we have with the Army, again, was something that I would not have necessarily built up while I was just involved with the Navy. And that rapport continues. Not long ago, the SAS invited 9 Squadron people, including the Navy, to come to a reunion to sort of chew over the good times and the interesting times in Vietnam. That was part of the stuff I was talking about before, when prior to my arrival, the early 9 Squadron people in Vietnam worked in a careful way to work out their procedures, and one of the things they did was develop a very, very good way of working with the SAS.
Yeah.
So that they were well-established routines by the time I got there, but there was still more to learn later on after I left. Yeah.